Hello, this is Jessica. Here's the English version of the Commander-Fran's video Star Citizen Development, The Story of a Dreamer. It's a video I don't know if you're ready for, but that you didn't expect to find when you woke up this morning. The video is the result of many months of research, viewing, cross-checking, summarizing, and sharing, and is intended to give you an overview of what you might have missed about the development of Star Citizen during the first 8 years. That is, from the creation of Roberts Space Industries, the Cloud Emporium Game Studio, and Star Citizen until the end of 2019. So if you only have 5 minutes to spare, you might want to postpone watching this video until later. Whether you haven't heard of Star Citizen yet, you haven't picked up your starter pack, or you're a citizen from the very beginning, I hope you'll enjoy this video because it contains a lot of fun facts and information from the very beginning. We have condensed this video because going into detail and showing you everything could lead to many videos and take several hours, but that's not the point here. So let's stick to the important aspects because there's a lot to cover. Let's not delay and start right away. First, a little message for you who are not yet on Star Citizen. You will have learned a lot about the youth of Star Citizen up till now, and that the video will have made you want to get started. Remember to write down this code that appears on the screen when you register in order to get 5,000 credits of the game, a little help from the start. Before, there was nothingness, emptiness, absolute silence. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit, but we have to admit that there wasn't much, or at least nothing measurable in Star Citizen as we know it today. If so, Star Citizen wouldn't have caused so much excitement across the globe in the last 8 years or so. By that time, there wasn't a great selection of games that dealt with space. Without mentioning any, if there had, Star Citizen wouldn't have been completed. But we gamers are eager for wide open spaces, and a thirst for discovering worlds and technologies that would never be able to be discovered in our current reality. Star Citizen, in 2011, promised a universe that was open to many facets of gameplay and rediscovering realms that are still unequaled at that time. So how could we not start dreaming and not adhere to the idea and revere the man who was able to make it possible? Star Citizen was born from a crazy idea by a video game genius, Chris Roberts, who had already created universes in the past and decided to launch a project 10 years after his last video game, Wing Commander, released in 1990 by Origin System. He also created games like Privateer, Starlancer, and Freelancer afterwards. Chris Roberts also worked in movies as a producer with some success with the movie Lord of War, The Punisher, and among others, as well as a movie adaptation of Wing Commander. All this started with Chris Roberts, along with some of his friends, accomplices, and collaborators on the path to create Star Citizen. Its purpose to create a vast and free universe in the form of multiplayer space simulation. But how to finance? Because from the beginning, he didn't want to have a publishing partnership and needed independence and accountability for his project. So he decided to finance it privately first, and then thanks to something called crowdfunding, which is a way to raise funds that since early 2010 has been booming among internet users of all kinds, from music creation projects, technological inventions, and crazy objects of all kinds. It's also a great boost for all startups struggling to find investors. So Chris Roberts thought, why not? He already had a good background of developers, project managers, and art directors behind him, but his project was big, so big that he needed many different resources that he couldn't find investors for, at least not without losing his autonomy. So crowdfunding became the holy grail, the perfect solution to give him free rein to his imagination. What Chris Roberts was already imagining at the time, no one could really conceive of, and even less with the type of technology, because the concept for this game was to make the most ambitious space simulation adventure for PCs ever created. Chris Roberts first put the idea of the new game on his company's website in November of 2011, which would be called Star Citizen. It was nothing yet, but it was the beginning of an idea that germinated before Cloud Emporium Games even existed. In order to capitalize, the Cloud Emporium studio was founded in late 2011, and then the development company Cloud Emporium Games also called CIG, and its subsidiary Robert Space Industries were officially created in April of 2012. That year was devoted to preparing the groundwork, setup, and to create a sample of the videos and concepts to show potential players before launching this fundraising campaign. But even before launching the Kickstarter, Chris had already raised $4 million via angel investors in a direct campaign on his website to get started and raise capital, as well as some equity to help the startup. And so this crowdfunding was set up initially with a goal of just $500,000 to be reached very quickly, then released to the media and websites to announce the launch in October of 2012. After the official launch of the campaign, Roberts declared that now the technology was powerful enough to meet his creative and technological desires that he planned to go back to the roots of Wing Commander. After the launch, the project was first announced at the Game Developers Conference online in Austin, Texas. GameSpot broadcasted the event live, and by the end of October 2012, more than 34,000 backers had signed up for the campaign. Backers is what we call the players who participate in this voluntary financing, and these backers had responded by raising an unprecedented $2 million for this short campaign. This was combined with the funds already raised on the RSI site in direct campaign. So by the end of October 2012, after the announcement about Star Citizen, there was still really only 7 CIG staff members, but more than 60,000 citizens already backing the game. At the time, the team was reduced to its simplest form, including Chris Roberts, joined by Ben Lesnick, Eric Peterson, and Sandy Gardner, among others. By the end of November 2012, there was a 24-hour live stream for the closing of the original campaign, and the staff had grown to 8. Along with more than 100,000 citizens and the crowdfunding campaign raising $6.5 million. By the end of 2012, more than $7.2 million had been raised in increments of $500,000 that followed each other very quickly, $2.1 million of which, as I said before, was the result of Kickstarter campaigns alone, which lasted only 30 days. Chris Roberts was not expecting this kind of excitement so quickly. CIG quickly saw the potential of this type of participatory financing. With this ongoing global fundraising, it allowed the studios to remain independent and grow at their own pace without really being accountable to anyone, except to their community, without whom CIG would be nothing, and they know this because it's the reason why the game was funded. October 10th was the date of the official announcement of the launch of Star Citizen. For players who wanted to support the development and get on the train of this great and ambitious project, players would agree to participate up to a sum of money and in exchange would receive early access, or rather the promise of a game, one that would grow and evolve over time. The initial expense was $30 for the Scout Starter Pack, and then that quickly turned into a $40 Mercenary Starter Pack with access to Star Citizen when it came out. For the very first ones to sign up, there was even a golden ticket, and they would have access to an alpha or a beta version of the game. But unfortunately, at the beginning of 2013, the starter pack didn't give them access anymore. Either you had to buy a more expensive package or pay the pass to get access in the future. This included the Hangar and the beginning of the Arena Commander, but only if you wanted to spend as much as possible. Or you could purchase a $15,000 collector's package that would buy you the 14 ships available for purchase at the time, and all sorts of other items, along with other collectible pieces in the game. They used to put a lot of emphasizing on the merchandising at the time, but this pack was soon sold out, and then the only pack that you could get was the Wing Commander, which included 5 ships, 20,000 Alpha United Earth credits, or aUEC, exclusive ship skins, but also a series of physical goodies that only backers in the early days could have, because since then, real items related to Star Citizen had become rare. In any case, with the various contributions, donations, purchases, whatever you want to call it, a player would usually receive one or more ships that would later allow them to travel through the universe. At this point, the player didn't know how to do anything yet. Digital purchases came with a warning to specify what exactly one was receiving, because with that purchase, the player was participating in the financing for the development of the game. It must be admitted at the beginning, the players who believed in the project and were present from the very first hours, the first months, and the first years had to be patient before seeing results in the development of the game. Players who put up more than $1,000 received Chairman's Club status from the start, which is still the case today. This status was created by lead marketing executive Sandy Gardner, who made the metal citizen cards that no longer exist today. Chairman's Club status gives you access to additional services such as contact portals that respond fairly quickly, early access to various updates, and access to exclusive content such as special and often very expensive packs. For the record, Sandy Gardner has been working with Chris Roberts for a long time, long before Star Citizen on his film production, so check out episode 11 of Wingman's Hangar, where they're all cute. Squadron 42 was in the cards from the start, with the first trailer on October 15, 2012, that announced a single-player game in a vast UEE campaign against a malevolent and aggressive alien race, the Vandul. Originally, CIG announced that the game would be released in 2014 or 2015. It was Squadron 42, a single-player scripted game along with the expansive universe that would give players so much autonomy. It was the reward, and gave you access to an open world and universe discovered within Squadron 42. CIG even mentioned a limited number of spaces at the beginning for alpha and beta access to the game, but meeting that quota meant pledges and therefore the bulk of the funding for Star Citizen, so those quotas were quickly dropped, and it was around that time that the Squadron 42 and Star Citizen packs were split. The various game access packs had since doubled, if not tripled. To give you an idea today, the Andromeda Constellation is around $330 and doesn't have Squadron 42. But in 2012, the $200 Collections Edition came with the Constellation, the game, Squadron 42, the metal box, a USB key, a physical map, blueprints of ships, books, and bonuses. And since the ships purchased for the Persistent Universe wouldn't be specifically available in the single-player game because it's a story-driven game with a storyline to follow, we had to find a way for players to interact with the content they purchased during the campaign, and that happened pretty quickly. Most of what one buys or receives as a result of a donation in Star Citizen is transferable to other players, and CIG mentioned that there was no need to take a lot of ships via cash donations, nor was there a need for a good immersion of the game in Star Citizen, especially since all ships could be bought in the game with the game currency. This was made clear from the beginning, and so to close on the crowdfunding, it wasn't the end of the Kickstarter that put an end to the participatory financing, far from it being just the beginning. So we're at the end of 2012, and CIG keeps in touch with the backers via announcements on the site and some videos of explanations by Chris Roberts. 2013 is just around the corner. We had to feed the imagination and captivate the existing backers, and above all, recruit new players. This is where CIG starts, perhaps without knowing it, an interaction with the players, or rather what will very quickly be called the community of players, in the form of media communication, something that will become unusual and visionary, especially for a game that hasn't even been released. Then starts the Wingman's Hangar, presented by Eric Peterson. This was the first periodical content of Cloud Emporium, and is a mix of presentations of the game, interviews, news about the life of the first developers of the studio, the projects, and the permanent construction of the game to keep the players in suspense. It was all hanging by a thread in the beginning. In February 2013, a developer studio in Austin opened its doors, and Star Citizen's development began in earnest. At that time, there was a staff of 20 people and 121,897 citizens. In June of 2013, it was Chris Roberts' turn to open more offices in Santa Monica. They had a staff of 32 people and 134,000 backers. So at last, they were finally getting some concrete information about the actual history of the improvements. Apart from Squadron 42, Star Citizen, which I am talking about in this video, is, or rather was, initially orientated around 5 modules: the Hangar module, the Dogfight module, which would be called Arena Commander, the FPS module, which will be called Star Marine, the Social module, that for a while was called Planetside, and the Persistent Universe module that essentially occupies all our time and thoughts. Our first real interaction with CIG was a module that arrived and was available through the first patch to provide us with a start to Star Citizen. That was the Hangar. So at that point in time, there were 40 people, or 40 developers at CIG, and almost 200,000 citizens. This first content, less than a year after the start of funding, was the first phase made available to players shown by Chris Roberts on August 24, 2013 at Gamescom, and materialized by the Hangar module, which arrived on August 30th, 2013 in the form of successive patches. But there wasn't much that could be done at the time. Make your ship appear in a hangar, look at it, and maybe go inside of them. That is not much for the players who had been waiting since October 2012, but it was the beginning of something, and the imagination was finally coming true. There were several different hangars available. The economic hangar, the business, the luxury, which was not yet available, and a little later the asteroid hangar, which was much more accomplished than the others. Initially, these hangars had been created to be the starting point with the choice of the planet, moon, asteroid, or space station from which one would want to start, and eventually these imposing hangar doors would open to the outside of the place one had chosen. But to do this, you first had to go to the RSI site and put the ship or ships you already owned into slots, which would then materialize your ship in the in-game hangar. At that point, something crazy developed. The CryEngine 3 program allowed you to take Star Citizen files to other community projects, other platforms, all under CryEngine, and it allowed you to enhance images of the textures and make your own environment, either take over the hangar and embellish it, for example, or test animations in a reduced space, and given the enthusiasm of some very motivated players who were good at development, even create flight systems. Of course, it was a real sandbox engine, at least for players who were really good at tinkering and developing. It is said that some of these players were hired by CIG, and strangely enough, some of them stopped creating and making videos for their own account overnight. Going back to the hangar, a platform via a screen with a holographic sphere gives you access to your ships, and gradually over time with the development of the hangar, we're able to place, swap weapons, and compare components. We can already see the work done by a team that was not so big at the time. This version of the hangar received many updates. The patch 2, 3, and 4 arrived during September of 2013, with various corrections and slight improvements, along with the 5th patch by the end of September 2013, which improves the hangar with a new shooting turret, animations for the constellation, as well as player animations such as jumping on the ship, for example. October 2013 arrived with a lot of hype. The first CitizenCon in 2013 was going to be held in Austin on October 10th, which would celebrate the first anniversary of the announcement of Star Citizen. It was a rather small event at the time, a succession of interviews and presentations based on the concepts to see what Star Citizen would lead to, and it ended with an interaction in a very large hangar of what you can do indoors with freedom of camera movements. Patch 7, just after CitizenCon on October 12, had no noticeable differences. One can only reply that at the time one could already sit on the Constellation's throne, and those who had bought a lot of ships, because their hangar was extensive in slots, could enjoy a huge surface to walk between their jewels, and still have the most beautiful holodeck effect. There were also videos from the community with creation of fan-made ship models not made by CIG. We could also see the ships available in the code of Star Citizen. The 5 models of Aurora, the 4 300 series models of Origin, 4 Hornet, the Avenger, the Freelancer, and Constellation, which like the Freelancer had no model name. 16 ships therefore already developed in the Star Citizen database. In October of 2013, the addition of Foundry 42 was announced. By that time, they had a staff of 52 people and about 248,000 backers. Patch 9 arrived on December 12, 2013, and announced that because of the persistence on the customer side, any change made in the hangar would now become permanent. Also released in December of 2013, an extension of the Austin studio and expansion of the content for the community was released. CIG had grown to 60 developers by the end of December of 2013, and over $35 million raised before patch 10 was released on December 20th. This further improved the shooting range with reticle, decorative content, improvements to some lights in the hangar was added, as well as bowling with his Grey Cat. Early February 2014 gave us the patches 11 and 11.1. It was now possible to do shooting tests with ship weapons and with moving Vanduul panels, which was a pretty nice shooting range for the time, but everything still went through the hangar. It served as the main menu. It was the goal of CIG in the long run that the hangar would be our real home, and via an elevator and a friend's code to enter, a player was allowed to join another player's hangar, a feature that never saw the light of day. It was around the same time in 2014 that CIG realized, with the arrival of more funds than expected, stretch goals was started. That is to say that as the developers' objectives were reached, in the long term, it would now be possible to create a very different game, bigger, deeper, more complete, as much in line with Chris Roberts' aspirations and dreams, as well as the expectations of the community. RSI regularly explained at the beginning that when you had a city or a developed area, you could not land there directly or manually, but rather it was planned to approach a specific area with a computer control, or even kinematics with assistance to take control of your ship. In February of 2014, Wilmslow Studio in Manchester opened to help with the Foundry 42. At this time, there were 93 people on the team and 350,000 citizens. In a very short amount of time, just 2.5 months between February and May of 2014, patch 11.1 and 11.2 were released. But in early June 2014, a huge step was announced. It was the second long-awaited module with the Space Arena Commander, and it gave life to the ships and to be able to use them within a limited space. It was just the beginning. This update made it possible to train in ship combat, a feature called Dogfight. It was first available as single player. This patch had the number V0.8.1, and the hangar patches would continue to develop together for a while with 12.4. It was a bit crazy with those numberings. On June 11, 2014, with 139 CIG staff members and over 416,000 players, the first Around the Verse was started. With quick succession, patch after patch from 0.8.2 to 0.8.5 were released. At the same time, the patch 12.5 launched on July 31st, which still had no friends list. At the time, the system imagined players could meet each other, but this concept was a disaster. One of the players would have to start a game, and during the loading screen, a code of 12 to 16 characters would appear, which was rather complex, and then the other players had to enter this code to join you in a limited time during the loading process, which only lasted about a minute. Once in the game, the code disappeared. If any of your friends misunderstood or had difficulties with the code, then the player had to go back out and start the process all over again. Even though many people still find the system imperfect today, it's much better than it was back then. Upon the release of V0.8.3 on June 17th, the Arena Commander was made available in the main menu. From then on, there was no longer any need to go exclusively through the hangar simulators. In September 2014, it was the last patch in this form, patch 13, which had big bug fixes, including several on the Freelancer, which included better sound effects and a ton of new features with ship skins, and the fuel gauge on the HUD, along with new animations, and the arrival of the racing mode called the Murray Cup. This was a novelty that hasn't changed much since then. It's races with small, fast crafts and cities marked out in racing circuits, with the level of New Horizon speedways, and especially the arrival of the Vanduul Swarm mode that was compatible with the Arena Commander. And there were big changes here too for the hangars. A new system, now all built on the same principle, so that the size of each hangar can fit into the same slot, no matter where in the future, including rework and rearrangement of the hangars along with new names. The economic or discount hangars became the self-land. The business, with a little dark blue, became the Aero View, and the luxury became the Revel and York, in addition to the asteroid hangar into VFG Industrial. However, the hangars will have to be rebuilt in the future, because they no longer correspond to the future standards for those slots in the universe. But when you know today's Star Citizen, you realize that for the developers, it's an interactive process. They are constantly testing and improving the functionality, because other concepts and projects change the plans and development. The result is not a straight line. So with a clear goal and the result directly at the end, one can observe a series of designs and graphics that have been created, used, but are no longer in use and will not not be used in the future, and yet we had to imagine them, create them, test them, to get them where they are today, and to continue to bring players and backers and keep them waiting while Star Citizen is being developed. We had to keep them busy with this hangar and different features, objects to put in and look at, even though it's not much used today. On October 10, 2014, with CIG staff up to 156 people and nearly 60,000 backers, we arrive at the second CitizenCon, which took place in Los Angeles at this time. There was a look back at CitizenCon 2013 and a presentation of the headquarters and part of the studio in Santa Monica and the Foundry 42 in Manchester. At CitizenCon, information was released about the arena, as well as presentations on the new Cutlass Blue and Black and announcements on the 890 jump. Interviews were also done, and it ended with a 1-hour-long gameplay demo, which included a quantum release near AirCorp with the Constellation and a landing on Area 18, directly in the center, along with a passage through a validation airlock and the AirCorp Plaza, which already seemed imagined and built in part less than 2 years after the announcement of the game. This environment was already very accomplished when we didn't yet have the shadow of a persistent universe, but crazy and enticing images, hallucinating shadow effects on the ships and in the sky above the AirCorp Plaza made the beginnings of a social module. But you couldn't jump directly to the surface of AirCorp. It's the kinematics that did the job, just like the landing of the Constellation. With the release of version 0.9.2 in December of 2014, numerous patches were made to improve and remove all kinds of bugs for the hangar, the arena commander, and the racing. A quick note about November, which became a good month for cash flow given the implementation of the anniversary week and the rest of the year, which included different concepts that continued to feed the player and raise funds for the growth and operation of the studio. The end of the year announced the end of the need for crowdfunding, which had raised more than $65 million. CIG was finally able to abandon the tiering system in favor of an almost permanent transparency on the amount of participation and expenses. On December 19th, V1.0.0 was released with a new lobby system and a list of player and friends on the website, an updated hangar with another character. You could also move between rooms of the same hangar with Greycat, along with a slightly improved arena commander and new HUDs for ships. Also added was a ship signature system. The character was now affected by light lateral forces and so on without a persistent universe. By the end of 2014, the amount raised was more than $68.5 million. February of 2015 marked the opening of the studios in Frankfurt as an extension of the Foundry 42 in Manchester. CIG now had a staff of 205 people and 725,000 citizens. The game officially entered the alpha phase of its development, with CIG accelerating to make the persistent universe available. The patch 1.1.0, released on March 20th, 2015, brings the arrival of free flight 4-person multiplayer in the Arena Commander. The automatic landing with the N key held the arrival of RECs, which stand for Rental Equipment Credits. These are used to rent ship components and weaponry in the Arena Commander, and was also useful later in another module and the onset of damage to the ships, with a few other little features, but too much to cover everything here. Small fun fact, April 2015 was the month of the famous motion capture for Squadron 42, with Gary Oldman, Mark Hamill, Mark Strong, and Gillian Anderson, among others. The patches 1.1.1 to 1.1.6 also added various small features, animations, balancing, patches like the in-flight tutorial and the free flight, which goes to 8 in May, then the Royal Battle and the Squadron Battle to 16 in July. Obviously, the various old ships that had ended up receiving one or more variant, like the Andromeda Constellation for example, received better textures and light effects, but it must be admitted that there is not a lot to go on between April and August, since the developers were working hard on a big piece at the time. In August 2015 at Gamescom, a multi-crew demo and a new module were presented to players, the social module that came after the hangar and dogfight. At this time, there was 266 developers at CIG and getting closer to having 1 million citizens. So for the patch 1.2.0, released on August 28, 2015, and for the newer followers, you won't believe it, but we got, well, not me, I wasn't there yet, but the backers at ArtCorp finally got to see a small version of Area 18. I'll explain. First of all, the Arena Commander 2.0 received an improved flight model along with other improvements to the social module, which was called PlanetSide. CIG was now called the ArcCorp. A multiplayer module was also created that would allow people to meet friends in the hangar, to have a contact list in their Mobiglass, chat in-game with the environment at ArcCorp, with the Arena Commander, and the FPS lobby. This module was only by foot. You couldn't fly around ArcCorp in a ship. You had to take a lift, which was located through a double door behind the character when you arrived in the hangar. Then the player had to go through an airlock to access a social module. But what the players really wanted was a persistent universe and all of the promise of it. And the social module was a little bit of an incubation and a real-life multiplayer test of what we were going to have later on. At the time, we were still promised that we would have the first episode of Squadron 42 in the fall of 2015, but the future told us that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. By then, it was time for CitizenCon 2015, finally the first one in Manchester, still with the key date of October 10th. Presentations focused on the Future 2.0 update, along with 1 hour of gameplay around Crusader, Osler's Gate, Cry Astrofuel, and Security Post Carrera. And finally it arrived, a date to remember, December 11th, 2015, the date that 2.0 was officially released. What the players were really waiting for was a major breakthrough and the beginning of a real persistent universe. Along with the PU Live and all its promises, it was the arrival of Crusader, the fascinating gas giant, and Port Olisar with its already bewitching and characteristic music. Then there was also Camaret, and we could also observe the Cry Astrofuel 42, which was closer to Crusader at the time. We can see the repair by drones and refueling. There was also the Security Post Carrera around Selin, the Kovalex shipping hub, and Yella. The amount raised by the end of 2015 is $104.5 million. This part of Star Citizen, and therefore its persistent universe, was also catalogued, but not in a pejorative way, as a sandbox game that would allow many styles of gameplay for all tastes and for various talents, because one could fight, defend, trade, mine, as being a beginning of industry, but also navigate, explore, and interact with players. Also with many non-player characters with the possibility in the long run to create its own commercial lines, its own industry, and its own production lines. The 2.1 update arrived on the 15th of January 2016. A freelancer finally flyable, as well as the Saber and an upgrade to the Vanguard Warden budget. Also the arrival of the Million Mile High Club for those lucky enough to test, accessible by the hangar lift or the main menu. Then everything follows the 2.2.0 on March 4th, 2016, which included an adjustment to the Crusader and Moons, now at more appropriate distances, and the instances also go from 16 to 24 players, with a frame rate per second that was quite difficult at the time. New animations in FPS 0G, new energy assault rifle weapons, but most importantly activation of monitored areas and a new icon on the interface that let players know if they are in a monitored area or an armistice zone. Arrival of the hostility system and the bounty hunting system, with the possibility to become outlawed with different levels of criminality and skins of related characters, along with Commander moves that can be activated and deactivated by players. Direct Live 2.2.2 brought better stability and bug fixes, but still had frame rate difficulties and no real noticeable new features. The second week of March 2016 allowed free flight to test the new ships. Patch 2.3.0 on March 26, 2016 went along with the PTU of March 19th. This patch gives access to new Cal-2Al in flight and the Starfare ready for the hangar, the Revell in York, as well as 2 other FPS weapons, new components, animated updates, and EVAs, as well as many fixes in the game. Additional AI security around Port Olisar to attack players with certain levels of crime. Recovery sites on Yella were now marked with green flares. The reward for killing a level 5 criminal was the Super Rifle Arrowhead available in Port Olisar, and an updated Devastator 12 shotgun, as well as other weapon availabilities here and there. In 2016, a more complicated and difficult period started in terms of communication for CIG. There were many postponements and a lot of expectations from the players. Everyone was waiting for the 3.0 update, which was supposed to add so much. The patch 2.4.0 on June 9, 2016 starts the shopping experience as announced by CIG after months of waiting for the opening of the Kasaba outlet on ArcCorp. Clothes were there, Cubby Blast was also there to sell weapons, flight suits, and armor. Many modifications were made to the Crusader, Carrera, and Port Alicer, which was also renovated with the improvement of the atrium, the implementation of new missions, the arrival of the alpha currency UEC, and it was the first iteration of server-side persistence. Thanks to this, CIG started to store information about characters, items, currency, and reputation in-game so they could retrieve them between game sessions. The arrival of the in-game Starfarer and the Reliant Hangar was ready. In August 2016, CIG announces 3.0 with the Crusader Zone completed. We got an hour of gameplay on Delamar. Grimhex arrived on August 25, 2016 with the 2.5, like a new bone to gnaw for backers waiting for the announced 3.0, and especially a new place for spawn and new landing zone. The announcements of the Argo MPUV, the Reliant, with a nice evolution of graphics, textures, and lights, an F-flight ready ship like the Herald and Vanguard. Also at this Gamecom, we had the announcement of the concept of the Anvil Terrapin and the first demo of an entry into the atmosphere, with heat effects and the first landing on the planetoid by Delamar and Levski, and mission donor Miles Eckhart. In September 2016, the studio had always defended itself for not having a firm date for the release of Squadron 42, even though a sentence from Chris Roberts explicitly states that all the graphic content and missions would be completed by the end of the year. But another statement to justify itself announced that it would not be possible for Squadron 42 to be released before mid to late 2017. Even if we can assume that transparency is difficult in this kind of environment, because to raise funds to develop such a project, you have to make people dream. It's also a part that takes time, and the technical constraints and the reality of team of developers is why CIG could have developed and released such a new and ambitious project in less than 5 years, while Diablo 3 or Prey and so on took 11 years to be done. It's communication that is tricky here, because without the community, development doesn't progress. CIG doesn't have unlimited or calculated funds with an editor behind and a normal estimated timeline. The backers would never have put so much into this project on the actual timeline known today if it had been unveiled in 2012. And anyway, who can read into the future? When someone like Elon Musk tells you that in 2024 he'll be able to send, no, I'm expressing myself badly, when he says that he will send 6 people around the moon and then back, and all in 15 days, you want to believe him. And it's the same thing for Chris Roberts. Yet the deadlines are unrealistic each time because the reality of the field, the advancement of technology, the return of the community, the permanent modifications, and the perfectionism of Chris Roberts. This is not meant to displease the community to have delays without a deadline. CitizenCon 2016 was held in Los Angeles on October 9th, featuring about an hour of gameplay on Lair with the Sand Snake, with those beautiful images of this planet that seems so rich, nice to live on, and you could settle down like a flower. Players had something to dream about again, because between 2.5, which didn't get any add-ons, neither did 2.5.1, and so on, for 4 long months, where nothing really changed, but the developers were still working hard. The 2.6 is the arrival of Star Marine as a Christmas present, on December 23rd to be exact, with 2 maps and 2 game modes, but no leaderboard yet. 4 new flyable ships, the Aegis Vanguard Hoplet, the Drake Herald, the Drake Caterpillar, and the Origin 85X, along with 4 new variants, the Anvil Hornet F7C Wildfire, the Aegis Avenger Titan Renegade, the Aegis Saber Comet, and the Aegis Gladius Valiant. It was truly Christmas. There's also been new FPS postures and balancing all over the place, which includes ship speeds that have been adapted, opening the bar in Grimhex, and new places to visit around Crusader. New missions and the asteroid belt in Yella received an update with a denser song. December 2016 is the period of the transition from the City Engine 3 to the Amazon Lumberyard, which has been the subject of a lot of discussion and has caused a lot of ink to flow. The year ends with a CIG staff consisting of 369 people, and the amount raised by the end of 2016 was $142.6 million. It is worth noting that all this 2.6 to 3.0 that cover almost the entire year of 2017 is a period known to be called the Great Drought. Difficult moments for CIG for the financing of the game, and will be a great amount of doubt also for the backers, with the 3.0 constantly pushed back, but it was also due to various difficulties, various developments that did not advance the financing, which was stagnant at times, but especially big disappointments on Star Marine, which had been outsourced by another studio, and expectations were not there, so the development of Star Marine was taken over by CIG, which broke the contract. The first complimentary patch of this version 2.6 was the 2.6.1 of February 17, which consisted of bug fixes and balancing in the Arena Command race mode in Star Marine, and the implementation of the leaderboard and some optimizations of exterior and interior of some ships, like the Retaliator and the Starfarer and the 85X, to name a few. A small novelty that deserves to be highlighted is that we could see different servers at startups such as the USA, Europe, and Australia. Then finally, at 2.6.2 of March 31st, with the implementation of mentioned mega maps for multiplayer in the Arena Commander and Star Marine, new ship the Drake Buccaneer available in-game, this 2.6.2 also brings the support of a new widescreen resolution on 921. Otherwise, several slight modifications in Star Marine, but no major change either. And finally, the 2.6.3 of April 7, 2017, and the 3.0 that still does not arrive with the moons that was long awaited for months in July 2017. We were also at $154 million of development. This patch is mainly dedicated to the correction of bugs, including problems with the pad and the in-Star Marine, with a continuous focus on the stability and the performance of the game, which was nothing new. So we're still moving forward. Here we are at CitizenCon 2017 in Frankfurt on October 27th, which is a year it was not held on the 10th. 1 hour of gameplay on ArcCorp with Astromeda to start, then the ArcCorp Plaza in a version that is not the final version, given the possibility of taking a ship directly from the center after passing a simple security lock at this ArcCorp Plaza, and we fly over Area 18, and then leave the atmosphere and arrive on a station in low orbit with a madness at the time when we did not yet have Moons of Crusader in October 2017. It helped to boost the purchase of ships at the anniversary week that year, and I will confide it to you, that video got me started on Star Citizen, I'll tell you that. Then departure for Hurston, passing over an industrial complex, then near Lorville, which was much more industrial, with many smoke towers than today, and a Nox tour for a return to Lorville to see the first living specimens. And finally, the 3.0 on November 29, 2017. So now I'm going to give each time 2 or 3 words to describe the patches. So here, Moon of Crusaders, Lepsky, the Grail of Features, the Alpha 3.0.0 was the biggest update of CIG's content to date, with many technical updates and the entire base system. Players finally had access to planetary surfaces for the first time on 3 moons, Yela, Daymar, and the Cillian, as well as the mining planetoid Delamar, and especially Levski, a base built in rock that was an active mining facility that was abandoned and later became a hotbed for political radicals and criminals. Rather anti-EEU zone, but policing nonetheless. The planetary bodies now had a full rotation motion with dynamic day and night cycles. That was more than 2 years ago. These new surfaces are vast, with over 3 million square kilometers to explore, and dotted with surface outposts and abandoned ships. In addition, they have added 4 new vessels, the RSI Constellation Aquila, the Miss Prospector, the Apolax, and the Drake Dragonfly, given the new Gravelin system, and the first dedicated land vehicle, the Ursa Explorer. The basis of our redesigned mission system with new missions, a brand new launcher, and a whole new launcher with a lot of information was in the patch note about the new features, the keyboard keys and how to use it, including the system of interaction with the F key. It was also the beginning of the landing via the air control and clearance system, the quantum system via the star map, breathing, endurance, and heart rate, the injury system, clues and hints, group game launch, character and ship persistent status is now updated every few minutes and on the logout. After our death, we are reborn in the station that was last visited. The visit was determined by proximity. This is no longer the case today. The PNJs now go about their daily business on Grimhex, Port Alicer, and Levski. Introduction of store kiosk changes on the Afterburner, and finally overhaul of the mission system, with now all the following gameplay offered or promised at different levels of completion, such as deliveries, deployment, recovery, AI bounty hunting, AI killing, harvesting, waste disposal, patrol, abandoned investigation, escort, and I'm going through dozens of small changes and details. A little long here for the 3.0, but it has made great changes for Star Citizen and players. The basis of what we have today, also why it was so long awaited, because it was promised for late 2016. At the base, it was a big piece, so I will put the link in the comments to an even better patch note. Also a link to the post in Spectrum that explains the 3.0 in detail by the CIG staff, lines and lines of new changes. Here is a list of ships that received the most attention from this update: Gladius, Hornet Series, Saber Vanguard, Constellation Series, Cutlass Black, Caterpillar, Nox, the Dragonfly, the Prosecutor, the Freelancer, the Aurora Series, the Argo, the the Buccaneer, the Grey Cat, the Starfarer, the Catual, the Avenger series, the Gladiator, the Mustang series, the Herald, the Merlin, the 300 series, and the Ursa. Very big work from the developers, adding damage reactions following a contact with your ship with alarms inside, obviously a lot of AI optimization, for example new armor and weapons for the Behering P8 and the new Mobi-Glass, but that will change a little bit later. New HUD, so ship interface can allow several customizable screens. The amount raised by the end of 2017 is $175.5 million, a CIG staff of 464 people, and nearly 1.8 million citizens. For the 3.1.0 on March 31st, 2018, there was almost 2 million Star citizens. This patch included miscellaneous corrections in the game 3.0. More Mobi-Glass modifications, to date the current one in fact, creation of the Planet Tech system for the generation of planet, which is how the Crusader moons were created. Big improvements on ship explosions, light effects, arrival of the distress call so that a player can jump to your position, arrival of the Misk Razor, the Trumbull Cyclone, the Aponex Q, the Aegis Reclaimer, and the Terrapin of Anvil. For weapons, the Preacher Shadowgun, the series of tactical Gallinson series, and the Gemini R97. The 3.2.0 on June 30th, 2018 added gameplay mining to the moons of Crusader, Daymar, Yela, and Sillin. And the implementation of the group system, adding the Anvil Hurricane and the Asperia Blade, as well as the Aegis Eclipse and the 600i Explorer. Revisions of the Avengers and the ships now have the scanner ping feature, a chat channels created in the Mobi-Glass. Activation of the quantum travel of groups based on the game. In addition of OM points for orbital trajectories for quantum travel, allowing to travel around planetary bodies to near-surface destinations. Crime added when parking illegally rather than making a legal landing. Added clothing to Casabas Port Elisaire collection. Many new armors. New screens at Camaret terminals. Added weapons such as the Kazakh arm scalpel, the Demeco light machine gun, and the F-55 Gemini. Updated loading screens for all game modes. Quantum travel now had a calibration time depending on distance and destination. The joystick can now control pitch and yaw in free mode. The chat window is now open by default and available in third person. Balancing the rates of goods and services throughout the verses, and updated AI in dogfight, and many other details as well, because this 3.2 was quite important with a huge bug fix as long as the arm. 3.2.1 arrived on July 24, 2018, and 3.2.2 on August 2, 2018. These two updates included price adjustments, efficiency reductions on some AI turrets, balancing of insurance costs more in line with the cost of the ship, increased frequency for some missions, as well as several updates and adjustments for screens, interfaces, and weapons. The 2018 CitizenCon was held in Austin on October 10th, which featured 1 hour gameplay on the Hurston and unveiled the first public transport to the Hurston Dynamics building, 4 kilometers high. It was an incredible CitizenCon, where we didn't go into space once, and therefore directly after the CitizenCon, for the 3.3.0 on November 10th, 2018, was the introduction of the integrating voiceover IP and the faceover IP, which was later deactivated due to lack of efficiency. For those who don't know what voiceover IP is, it's the ability to talk directly in-game, and faceover IP is the ability to make faces in front of your webcam and have it transcribed on your character in-game. It's in this 3.3 that the repair, filling, remaining functionality previously associated with Cryastro has been extended to all the landing areas of the stations. Port Elisa, Levski, and Grimhex, as well as the rest of the rest areas. This update also includes additions to Crew L2, the quantum route planning, as well as a chip shop on Levski for in-game purchases of ships and vehicles, new mission donors, the former miner Rico Battaglia, and adds Astor mining to the existing planetary gameplay. For ships and vehicles, the TR Cyclones, the AARC, the RSI Constellation Phoenix, the Aegis Hammerhead, and Anvil Valkyrie. The coolers now use the power works according to the power levels and can be overclocked. The quantum drive now operates according to its power state, and the power level can be set independently for each element of the vessel, allowing them to be manually boosted or milled. Added Hurston Dynamics Dominance and Attrition series ship weapons, quantum drives now have a maximum range per jump that varies depending on the size of the component in question. Missions to Scrabble Race for the Arena Commander added to the rental system. Here we are on November 21st of 2018 with the 3.3.5 addition to the first planet being considerably larger than the moons and the biomes we have seen until now, with its landing zone Zorville, with the moons Atardine, Magda, Ariel, and Eta, now all populated with a handful of outposts, 7 additional rest areas, expanded interactions with some objects, new armor, and suits including the Odyssey 2, and finally, improvements on some ships and front fire vehicles for better visibility. The 3.3.6 arrived on November 22nd, 2018, and yes, you heard that right, just one day after the 3.3.5 update. It's the quickest release in the history of the development, with several fast corrections of numerous bugs at the exit of 3.3.5, which also had many server crashes. The developers had to work around the clock. On December 4, 2018, 3.3.7 was released. This update includes some fixes as always, but it was mainly to remove the elements of the anniversary week in Lorville, and the animation update of some PNCs. Then the 3.4.0 on December 21, 2018, just 1 month after the 3.3.5. It was the update with the access to the Hurston Dynamics building. It is the release of the Freelancer variants, which were the only ones you could see in the verse. As always, CIG acknowledges a series of known problems that may or may not have been solved before moving on to the content of this update, with both new content and content updates, because it's a patch with a lot of small changes in content and functionality. But the new features, additions to the Center Lorville Business District, accessible by the Central Transit Line that leaves from the Leavesden War. In this district, you can find the Commodity Exchange, the city's headquarters, as well as the office of the Constantine Hurston. The district also includes the Hurston Dynamics showroom, where the latest weapons from the weapons manufacturer are proudly displayed for purchase. New missions giver Wallace Klim, chemist and drug dealer, added to Levski, as well as modifications of the missions for Hurston. For the new ships, the Anvil Hawk, the 600i touring variant, and thus the Freelancer Miz, Dur, and Max, with its nice cargo capacity, and also the Constellation Phoenix Emerald in-game, modifications for the Prospector visual deployment, factoring extraction, addition to the SAR Ravager rifle, as well as various weapons for the Arena Commander. Also added was a possibility to rent weapons and ship components in the menu. By the end of December 2018, there was already more than 521 CIG employees and more than 2.12 million citizens. The amount raised by the end of 2018 was $205 million. The sub-updates in quotes under 3.4 had not been very interesting or important on the content, including 3.4.1 on January 14, 2019, an update that had 2 bug fixes with no new features. For example, the elevator of the 600i should be able to go down to the bottom, and the turrets of the Hammerhead should now have an alternate light mode that works. Another example, the 3.4.2 of January 15, 2019, again with the bug fixes, plus adjustments on quantum drives, added sounds for the Prospector, removed several SCU on the 600i touring, and the 3.4.3 of January 24, 2019, again purely technical update, which fixed crashed clients. For the 3.5.0 of May 5th, 2019, it is the Colors, the Ladies, the Tessia, the ArtCorp, and Reliant. It is the addition of a customization system of ArtCorp, and Reliant is the addition of a character customization system available to customize the mix of facial features to make your own character. The system includes simple and advanced modes that allow you to customize the face with the desired level of complexity. Moreover, the Edenomy selection allows you to select individual features such as eye color, hair color, skin tone, etc. Also adding playable female characters. Additions to ArtCorp and the moons Lyra and Walla, as well as a landing area, Area 18, separated by the city flight between the Area 18 Plaza and the Riker Memorial Spaceport. New mission givers Tessio Paccio add security control ships around Hurston, adding several missions for the ships arriving from the Reliant variants, with the Tana, Sen, and Mako, as well as the Anvil F7CM Super Hornet Hearthseeker and the full reward for the 300i. In weapons and armors, the Gemini F71, the Coda pistol, and addition of many color variants for the armors. And as always, updates of content features and gameplay already existing that I will not go into detail here. June 7, 2019 had the first sub-update with the 3.5.1. Main features of this patch were customization of the 300 series with the original and keeping the changes made to the ships as components and weapons during the reclaim, along with various other updates and bug fixes. Here is the 3.6 update of July 21, 2019. It had the hover mode, the ballista and the customization weapons updated with a little bit of everything, but it was mainly the arrival of the hover mode, so addition of visual and technical wear and tear of components, and planned malfunctions whose visibility of damaged thrusters to the vessels for the ships on P-72 and updated for P-52. The arrival of the Anvil Ballister was to be the arrival of the famous 890 jump, but would be delayed. New location and an update of the automated turret hacking system in Grimex. A complete revision of the law and crime system and the arrival of the attachments and customization for weapons. New bearing S38 pistol and the V-Smeg Lumen from Klaus & Warner, along with added features for IP voiceover channel like automatic proximity addition and a specific channel for ships. Completely updated the Delamar's external rest stop away from Crusader and added its own container object. Version 2 of the transit system. This is where trains are now looped with several trains on each line, which should reduce waiting time on the whole network. The elevators can now move to any hangar and are no longer specific to a certain hangar, as well as visual modifications around Lorville, temporary suppression of some missions, and adding others, along with the arrival of the black market economy with legal, illicit, and illegal goods, along with various other updates such as the rework of the Vanguard Warden, increased resistance of the hull of the Katu'al, improved shields, increased missile damage, updated HUD of the Gladius, and more. August 8, 2019 brought the arrival of the 3.6.1 technical update, which fixed many bugs. For example, a reduction of AI security control and adding a message on the HUD, and the so-called temporary disappearance of the VTOL animation, the cutlass thrusters, and other small details. The 3.6.2 update was released on September 5, 2019. Finally, the 890 jump. This update was mainly for the addition of this famous 890 jump in-game, and adds other extra large hangars in Lorville and Area 18 to accommodate the 890 and the Reclaimer. So let's move on to 3.7.0 of October 11, 2019. It is the inventory, the caves, and the mantis. A nice update in any case, more than it seemed at first glance. The update also added a voice activation option for voice-over IP transmission available in the menu options, FOIP, VOIP, and the addition of rental kiosks of ships. Players can now mine with the multi-tool with harvestable items that can now be found and collected on various planetary bodies. Implementation of the player's personal inventory arrived from the caves of Daymar, Hurston, and Aberdeen. The ATC will now restrict landing privileges based on crime. No more landing on certain areas in this case. New fact-finding missions for people who have gone into the caves. Players can now share Star Marine maps, the Good Doctor. For the ships, additions to the Vanguard Harbinger and the Sentinel, and arrival of a brand new gameplay available to players. The surprise for the RSI Mantis edition for the Banu Defender, as well as the addition of the new IFCS system that helps the proximity assistance for the incoming weapons, and the Kronig laser cannon series of the Salvag frag pistol, along with new weapons accessories and updates of some existing ones. Flares can now be bought in various stores, which is very important for FPS mining. In addition of an armor inventory at the MacFlux rucksack, a conscientious object on Levski, Cubby Blast on Area 18, and Tammy and Sons in Lorville. For the first time, new dissociation of the ship's database between the command arena and the persistent universe. Updated character customization added, and removed some elements like the disappearance of the rest stop Hur L2, reintroduction of level 5 crime stat, missions adjustments of the position of some no-fly zones around the horizontal hangars in Area 18, temporary removal of several cities from the delivery system, updated the private swarm, and some updates related to the arrival of the 890 jump, such as its consumption, resistance, and refueling costs related to the largest ship on Cryastro. Return to a single shield for the Arrow is originally planned, and finally some minor weapon modifications. The first sub-update, 3.7.2, arrived on October 22, 2019, which included adjustment to the rate of interruptions, correction of the bug on the Mantis, and features of the Mantis considered hostile, and temporary removal of the quantum overheating. Then the CitizenCon 2019 arrived, and it took place in Manchester on November 23rd. We were treated to an hour of gameplay on Microtech. The 3.7.2 arrived just after the 24th of November 2019, so it was the addition of the Anvil C8 Pisces and the C8 Pisces Expedition. Along with Mission Giver Behavior Update, the chat window had been moved lower to avoid overlap with user status, and a slight change to the ping on the Mantis. And finally, the last known big update of this video, the 3.8.0 of December 22nd, 2019. In addition to the Microtech planet, which included the outside of New Bagger's landing zone, even though we couldn't land there yet at this 3.8 release, and no access to the center of New Baggage, and therefore no transit either. Additions of orbital stations over the main planetary landing zones all over the world, which have their own names now. Adding a new variant on the inside of the rest stops with much more content. Added moisture effects to the visors and canopy for some ships when in appropriate environments. Players now have the ability to select their initial location when logging into the game for the first time after an upgrade. added rotating wind and cloud textures on all planets and moons, added dust and sandstorm effects on appropriate planetary bodies, and wind will now affect the flight model. Also added an impoundment function to the legal system as well as request, and added a criminal offense for assault and battery, new rescue mission for 890 hijacked jumps and calls to arm, in addition to higher difficulty patrol-style missions that result in harder vessels and guard turrets, added melee combat including fist and knife combat, as well as deadly and non-lethal holds, so the Grimmest Armistice has been updated to allow for it. Addition of a flashing abandoned cargo locator light for cargo being ejected from a destroyed vessel. Importantly, minor criminal offenses, vehicle collisions, or vehicle destruction will now not be triggered when committed against members of the same group. For weapons, arrival of the Animus, missile launchers, and the Bearing P6, and finally for new features, beginning with the implementation of the SSOCS, or the Server-Side Object Container Streaming. Modifications and adaptations to Kim Wallace moved to Grimmix, and traveling from Miles Eckhart to Lorville, and an increase of first-person speed and an update to Planet Tech. Now version 4. Big updates to all bodies, moons, and planets have been redone with this new version. Months of work, but very profitable for the future evolution of the planetary bodies. Updates and improvements of the third person and outside view cameras, and a whole series of minor bug fixes. At the end of December 2019, because that's where we stop, the amount raised was $261 million from crowdfunding, with a historic milestone of $250 million passed exactly on December 2nd at the end of the anniversary week of the Expo, and almost 2.5 million Star citizens, including all the accounts that may not be as active. In conclusion, you were able to see the steps that have led to where we are today, and how far we have come. Will the deadlines be maintained from now on? Not always. But what do we really want? The road can be as exciting as the destination, if not more so. The game will be in continuous development for years to come, with all the renewal that implies, and we backers are at the heart of this project. What an excitement to follow such a development, to participate, to see things evolve, to know everything that's being prepared. That's also why we love Star Citizen, and I know that many of you do, for the pleasure it gives us to receive these periodic updates and new content, to see sometimes minor and sometimes major advances, but the technical and structural pitfalls are part of this type of development and financing. Star Citizen still has many good years of development ahead of it, so yes, I'd like a beta one day, to have real persistence and finally evolve a character and an inventory. But do I wish Star Citizen would stop developing one day? Clearly not. Thank you for watching this video, which was the long version. There will be an intermediate and express version with music, as well as a French version. That was Commander-Fran. If you liked this video or just learned at least one thing, please comment to say what you learned or liked, and hit the thumbs up if that's the case, or share the video. This concludes the video that takes us on the journey from the beginning to the 3.8 version at the end of 2019. Now on to the next part.